Hey Siri, will I ever find love?
Ha, you have to be kidding me. You punk ass bitch have no
Okay,
heart.
well that's just... What's shaking booktube? My name's Cam and welcome back to another video. Today's one of those fun interactive videos where I asked you something on, Twitter or Instagram or YouTube itself in the community section, something. I asked you to help me out with the video and you gave me some input to use for the video. So with that in mind, if you want to be part of the next one of these, you're going to have to follow me. I want 100,000 followers on Twitter by the end of this day, before I even publish this video, or else I am going to fight the fucking cat.
Oh? Bring it on, you little punk-ass bitch. You think you can talk to me like that? I will come over there.
So, what am I doing today? Today I'm going to be chatting about some writing and being a writer hot takes. If you don't know what hot takes are, it's kind of like an unpopular opinion, except it's not meant to be so thought out. It's kind of meant to be like off the top of your head kind of thing. So on YouTube and Twitter, I asked for people's hot takes about writing or being a writer. Boy George, did you guys deliver? I got so many. Way more than I was expecting, actually. Some of them were more so just people's musings on writing or just writing tips straight up. I was looking more for like some hot takes, some opinions that can just be discussed quickly. But even with that in mind, I still had way too many for one video alone. So if you don't see yours in this video, please rest assured I am doing a part 2 to this. And that also means that you can leave a hot take about writing or being a writer in the comments of this video and it might make it into part 2. And please keep in mind these are hot takes, so I haven't really given these any prior thought. I haven't done research, so to speak. It's meant to just be my opinion, just straight up off the cuff. But with that said, that's enough talking. Let's go!
Who lives in a pineapple under the sea?
So number 1, starting strong, love triangles are not a bad thing, they're just overused. And I know what you're thinking,
Cam, love triangles?
Here's the thing, I've done a lot of trash talking on love triangles in the past. Don't. Just don't. But in a way, I agree with this sentiment. I mean, love triangles in theory should be a compelling plot or even a B-plot, depending on whether it's a romance story. But like you've said here, they're extremely overused, and I think even more so, they're not done that well in most cases. I mean, if you put in the work, I think I could be convinced to have faith in reading about a love triangle if it was compelling and just good. But almost all of the love triangles I've ever read about just felt like a cheap plot device to try and create tension or drama in a relationship when there wasn't really any need for it. Self-publishing is just as much work as traditional publishing, except the burden of work required is on one person, the author who decides to self-publish instead of many. That's kind of a hard thing to comment on unless you've done self-publishing and traditional publishing both. Obviously I haven't, I've only self-published. But I do think that the amount of work involved in self-publishing a book is overlooked a lot in a lot of cases. But I kind of understand why, because self-published books are so heavily diluted with just bad books. It's pretty difficult to come across and read a terrible self-published book and think that much effort went into it, when in fact, if you really thought about it, there probably was a lot of effort. There was probably even the same amount of passion involved in publishing that than a person who would go down the traditional route. And I think as time goes on, as self-publishing becomes more of a credible publishing choice, that view that self-publishing doesn't take any effort is probably going to sift out a little bit. But at the end of the day, there's probably always going to be more terrible self-published books than there are good ones. And it's just human nature to kind of find it difficult to imagine there was a lot of work involved in something that is low quality, But I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, self-publishing is, in a lot of cases, a lot more effort than people give it credit for. Absolutely. I won't say just as much or more than traditional publishing because, I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty educated on what goes on in the traditional publishing world from, doing my own research and talking to a lot of traditionally published people. And with traditional publishing, there are teams of people that do a lot of the stuff you have to do yourself when you're self-published. But with self-publishing, the only responsibility you have is to yourself, whereas with traditional publishing, there's a bunch of people relying on you, so you have a lot more responsibility. Being given a deadline to do certain things is a lot of pressure, and I think that requires a lot of hard work, so that could balance it out a bit, I think. Most books that are studied in school are out of date and should be modernized. This is actually a really interesting one, and I think it's something that could probably be a whole video on its own. I've given it a lot of thought, and I don't know where I land with this, because I love classic literature and fiction, alright? I love it. But I mean, it is kind of true that language is continually evolving and changing. And if we're giving, kids this literature to learn from, it's going to be hard for them to remain interested in something with completely outdated language. And I understand there's a lot more involved in analyzing classic literature than just the language itself, like all the allegories and all that, but a lot of those allegories can be found in modern books that would probably have a better opportunity of keeping the kids' interest. But with that said, from what I understand, a lot of schools do actually involve a lot more modern books in their curriculum rather than just, Greater Expectations and Catcher in the Rye and that. But, I think a lot more attention could be given to some modern books. I think they deserve a lot more credit than they get in terms of literary merit. In a lot of cases, I think classic literature is probably hailed a bit too highly in the academic sense, but what do I know? I'm just some schmuck. Just some idiot. What do I know? Your one qualification to be a writer is writing. Are you writing? Congratulations on being a writer. Yeah, technically yes. A writer is someone who writes. Studying literature / writing in college / university does in fact give you a leg up. Yeah, I mean, I think when a lot of people say this, it's more so the tone they say it that offends a lot of people, but at the same time, I think it is silly to get defensive about the fact that people who go to some kind of college or university and get educated on this stuff by a professional, someone who has literally studied and researched the intricacies of, literature and writing and creative fiction, etc., etc. I think to get defensive about the fact that someone in that environment might have a bit more education on the topic than you it's just silly. I mean, that obviously doesn't necessarily make the person who goes to college or university a better writer. It just means that they've been exposed to more education. And to be honest, I think increases the chances of them being a better writer, but again, doesn't steadfast make them a better writer. But let's be real, a lot of people can be dicks about it. I've seen a lot of debates on the topic of writing where one person has said, well, I actually went to college, so your opinion is invalid. It's just stupid. You can still be wrong about things. Half of writing a book is complaining about how you aren't writing the book. Every writer everywhere. I feel attacked, but it's so true. People need to stop writing stories about fan fiction writers. They're always super cringy. Is that a thing? I wasn't aware. I imagine that's like something in the contemporary young adult genre, maybe. Writing is one of the few careers where being supportive means telling you that you'll fail. Your dreams are unrealistic. Kind of sounds like you're speaking from experience, like people telling you that, and if that's the case, that's really sad, and I'm sorry. And again, it's such a tough thing to comment on because it depends on so many different factors. I mean, of course, I'm always going to be someone who advocates, following your dream, and if you want to be a writer, work really hard at it, and you should get there one day, that kind of thing. But at the same time, I mean, think of it like this. Think about, say you're a parent, right? And you've got a kid, and they don't have any job or anything like that. They don't have any ambitions other than excelling in their creative thing. It could be writing, it could be painting, music, etc. That's all they care about as far as a career goes. They're not studying, they're not looking into anything else. For a certain amount of time, absolutely, I would support them 100%, but I think if, for example, they got to like my age and they still hadn't shown any interest in any other career whatsoever, I would be pretty concerned, and I think that would be the time where tough love was necessary, and you would have to sit them down and say, look, it's great that you want to do this, and I think you should still be doing that, but maybe you should start seeing that as more of a side project as you focus on a career that is going to support you in your life immediately rather than just the distant future. As much as it sucks, tough love is sometimes necessary. I hate the words smirk, gasp, or growl, especially growl. Since when did humans start growling? I don't have a problem with it, to be honest. I mean, growling, like, I don't know. I feel like if I read a sentence, for example, sit down and shut up, growled Harry, that gives me a pretty clear picture of like if I was just to read that sentence, I would have a pretty clear picture of an angry person, like speaking in a very threatening manner, like growling, like you can imagine the sound. Like, I mean, obviously they're not saying the person literally growled, unless it's a sentence like Harry stood there and growled. That would be a little bit weird. I don't know if I would be okay with that, but if it's used as like a dialogue device, I think that's fine. Gasp, I can kind of understand there. I think gasp is definitely overused. But then again, this may be just because of me, because personally, it kind of grates me, those people, and I'm sure you know one where they gasp at like any news whatsoever that isn't even the slightest bit worthy of a gasp. Like I know someone like this, and I heard a conversation that literally went like this. It was one person walked over to them and said, "Oh no, I forgot my mum's birthday present." And the other person goes, "Oh no!" Like, really, dude? But that's like a petty thing. It doesn't affect me. I shouldn't be graded by that. It's just a silly thing. The issue of graphic sex being allowed in YA books, but frowns on graphic swearing. Every time I hear this, like, this point brought up, and I agree, 100%, I think swearing should probably be more appropriate in YA than sex, but at the same time, like, young adult is a very sexual time in people's lives, and I think sex is absolutely something that should be explored in young adult. I think that's important. But condoning that and then saying that swearing is bad, it's just, I don't know, it's just kind of dumb. It reminds me of the South Park movie, how the Americans get really pissed off at the Canadians because the Canadians have a TV show with a lot of farting and swearing, and it's juxtapositioned with the Americans' extreme violence in that movie. At least it's obviously satire, but I think there's a very strong social message to be found there.
The United States has graphic violence on television all the time. We can't believe that a movie with some foul language would piss you off so much.
Because it's evil!
Can I finish? Please, can I finish? Okay, I'm finished.
In a few of my videos, I've talked about how weird it is to write a book while I'm also trying to date. It's mega hard trying to balance a love life with the other love of my life, my book. I am very willing to blame my lack of love life on being a writer, but personally, nah, I don't think that would really impact me so much, but that's because I procrastinate so much. If you were someone who just wrote in all of your spare time, obviously that time would be impacted by having a significant other, but I don't think it would ever be at the point of being detrimental. Unless, of course, the person was really overbearing then. Perhaps in that case. There is too much advice that is both elitist and singular. Sorry to say it, but Twilight and Harry Potter were both bestsellers in the same world. Every story has a writer and a reader. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. It's a very valid point. Personally, I wasn't a huge fan of the Twilight series, sure, but here's the thing. People love to talk shit on that book series. They love to talk shit on it. People will go on and on about all of the things that sucked about the Twilight series, but no one is really discussing how or why it was so popular. That book series was immensely popular. And I really don't think it could be cheapened down to just because it was about a romantic entanglement between a teenager and a vampire. I mean, I think that's a big part of its popularity, sure, like the fetishizing between the danger of someone in that age group being with a vampire, because I imagine most of the people reading were in the same age group as Bella, but there has to be more to it because books like that have existed for a long time before then. And yeah, when people give writing advice, it can, in a lot of cases, apply to a very particular type of writing or a very particular genre, but it's too difficult, or I should say it's just kind of too unnecessary for the person giving the advice to give a massive disclaimer before the video or blog post or whatever saying, by the way, this is all the styles and genres that this advice would apply to. I think that's more so a responsibility that would fall on the person reading or watching the advice. There is a certain point where if you're intending to make writing your career, you have to take a bit of responsibility and have enough, like, awareness with writing, at least, to know when writing advice is valuable or applicable to you. Don't use "I'm a writer so I can stay home in PJs and not care about appearance" as an excuse not to keep yourself clean and groomed. Remember, showers exist. Use one. Dear all the people watching this video, if you're a writer, it's possible that your spouse has sent this through. And I mean, they're right. Writing isn't really an excuse to turn into a grub. I think it's just the writer aesthetic that we like to kind of cling to. It's just a fun thing, really. The disheveled, enigmatic, rough but intelligent and whimsical and brooding writer it's the thing, man. The importance of creative language choices, inventive sentence structure, and narrative voice is often neglected in contemporary YA and genre fiction, albeit overly fetishized in literary fiction. This is one thing I really hate, and I'm glad this is kind of the last hot take that we're going to finish on today. This is a hot take that I think is a really interesting debate and discussion, because people on both sides are extremely guilty of this, and it's always super frustrating to see. It's when people who love YA generalize all of the people who prefer adult fiction, and all of the people who prefer adult fiction generalize all of the people who love YA. And it usually goes like this. The people who prefer adult fiction will assume that anyone who reads YA is due to a lack of understanding or lacking the capability to read and understand adult fiction, and that's just almost always not the case. Just objectively, that's incorrect. I can guarantee if you went out and did a survey of adults who prefer to read YA, and I like to read YA quite a lot of the time, that survey would show that the reason people prefer to read YA isn't because it's easier, but because the story is something that is more pleasing to them. YA has a very specific kind of niche in terms of how the story plays out, and whether you see that as too simple for your sophisticated mind or something like that. Ultimately, it comes down to the fact they enjoy that, leave them be, and just stop assuming that is synonymous with being stupid or uneducated, because it's embarrassing, to be honest. But on the flip side, I'm sorry people who prefer YA, but you don't get off that easy. And I have seen this. A lot of people who prefer YA like to think that all of the people who prefer adult fiction are just super old people who have their noses turned up at anyone who doesn't read it. A lot of people like that exist, people like the ones I just kind of spoke to just then. But they're a minority, and the preference to read adult fiction isn't born out of thinking they're higher than thou and they're so incredibly intelligent that they couldn't possibly spend the time reading something as arbitrary as YA. Young adult? Oh, my mouth is so aged and wise that I could not even develop the spittle. It's silly. Some people just don't like the stories that are told in YA, and I think as a YA audience, we need to kind of accept the fact and stop denying that YA doesn't have a very particular structure. It does. It just does. That's what a lot of people like about YA. It's reliable. It sticks to a format. It sticks to a formula, and it very, very rarely goes outside of that formula. But yes, in regards to this hot take, I guess inventive sentence structure and narrative voice is often neglected in contemporary YA. Yeah, it often is the word. I wouldn't say always. I wouldn't even come close to saying always. And yes, complicated sentence structure and use of more literary devices is obviously more evident in adult writing, but that doesn't necessarily make that adult book more interesting or more relevant or more important or anything like that. It just doesn't. The one thing I'll always prioritize with books is the story, because that's the one thing that can drive you through bad writing, is a good story. If it's a bad story, no matter how good the writing is, you're not going to want to read it. A lot of YA has good stories regardless of the writing. A lot of adult books have good stories regardless of the writing. So whether it's too simple or too dense, it's just, who cares, actually? Who fucking cares, dude? Just read what you want to read. My God! Oh my God! That's it. That's all it takes. Like I said, I couldn't do all of the ones I got because I got a lot, and some people sent more than one, so I only chose one from those people if they were included in this video. Or if you have any writing, being a writer, hot takes of your own, leave it in the comments of this video, and you might make it into the next one. Who knows? Anything could happen. Make sure you stick around on the channel because later this week I have another video coming that you guys helped me out with. I appreciate that. Make sure you follow me on my social platforms so you can join in the next one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Catch ya.